Young people's experiences, ideas, choices, and preferences help shape the future of cities. This episode of the Bright Young Minds show on Future Cities Africa is with Phila Lubisi, currently a key account manager at Altron Karabina. Phila, welcome. It's great to have you on the show. Can you give us a brief introduction to your career, background, and your role at Altron Karabina and why it is important?
My name is Phila Lubisi. I'm a key account manager at Altron Karabina at present. So in the sales role in enterprise IT sales. So far, I've always been in this kind of sector in my career. I first started off working for a multinational company, also in the IT sector, startup based company looking to expand its product offering and clients within the African market. So that's kind of how I got introduced into the IT industry as a whole. Spent 2 years there. I learned quite a lot about dealing with clients, positioning value propositions, and also dealing with various markets, as I said, working throughout the African continent. Then I transitioned into the South African context at one of the largest systems integrators in the country, BCX, where I joined as part of a leadership program initially under the old CEO. Basically, the idea for that was building up new talent, bringing in a set of fresh eyes into a very kind of legacy based IT organization, and with the hope that obviously for renewal purposes and for succession planning, that we would play a role in that arena. So that's how I initially got introduced into the organization. And as part of that role, kind of, managed to do a lot of things that were outside of scope for a lot of people. So I was really introduced to representing the company in various platforms, whether it be internal company events, hosting, the sales conference, for example, within my first 3 months there, which I quite enjoyed, which introduced me to the broader organization and put me in a good position to learn a lot very quickly. So I really enjoyed my time there. I got also the opportunity to meet a lot of industry players. Given the size of that organization, I was really in a position where I could meet and learn from some of the top executives in the industry very early on, and that really exponentiated my growth as a professional and as an individual. So I spent 3 years there doing work kind of that is diverse, but at the end, I eventually got back to an account management type of primary role, which is really what I like to do, dealing with clients, solving problems for them, and also, of course, positioning our company against our competitors. So that's really what I enjoy doing. And then that finds me now at Altron, right? Where I joined almost as a hybrid. It's almost a hybrid role of my first two experiences in corporate, because on the one hand, I joined a startup project within a large organization, very much similar to the one I was at before. But so that it's giving me the best of both. So I'm part of starting up the public sector, especially for a division within Altron called Altron Karabina, which deals within the Microsoft suite of offerings. So it was a very attractive position for me to join because, as I said, I felt like it combined two of my experiences very well. One, the absolute dynamism of a new project, which I really enjoy, although very painful at times, but I really enjoy starting up something new, trying and failing, and hopefully by the end of it, finding success. So with, of course, still the legacy of an organization that's operated in South Africa for decades.
You've also been involved in peer to peer mentorship, and it's been a fruitful experience. Tell us more about it.
I have been involved in youth mentorship early on in my career, which is quite interesting because I was also extremely young. I think I still am fairly young, but at the time, at 22, 23, I was really interested by the idea of peer-to-peer mentorship, right? So not so much a kind of hierarchical structure to mentorship where one individual is extremely accomplished and one is a novice coming into a particular discipline or industry. I was very much, excited by the idea of can individuals who are on the same level starting up mentor each other? Can they help each other figure out how to navigate a particular space without the aid of someone who's much, much more experienced? And I think that came about simply because it's not always easy to find a mentor, especially a good one. So what most people have at their disposal, however, are peers and colleagues. So I wanted to explore that idea of saying, instead of trying to find this unicorn of a mentor who's gonna just guide you through everything and who's gonna like you and be important to you as a person, why not just build a friendship group where you guys can help each other grow and figuring it out as you go? And so that led to, that was kind of like a program, just an informal program that I ran with a lot of my friends from university and some of the individuals and mentees to me that I met within my role at university as chairperson of the Tech Society, right? So I got to meet a lot of students, and I decided to form this group. We'd meet once a month, share reading material, share any experiences that we might be going through, and I found that quite interesting. And it eventually led to me doing or presenting a TED talk at TEDx Pretoria in 2016, I think it was, that was published in 2017.
Pila, you've attended Govtech in 2022. What are some of the key takeaways from the conversations that you've had?
The one of the main takeaways, and especially with the context of what we've just went through with COVID, the government sector has always kind of been seen to lag behind from a digitization point of view. And there are reasons sometimes that underpin that. But I found that in this year's GovTech in particular, there was really a lot of conversations not started by us as partners or technology providers, but government departments and institutions. So they are coming to us and going, we have this manual process. Can we, or how can we take it to a more digital sphere, right? So that's really, I think, from a cultural point of view, one of the main shifts that I noticed within the GovTech event this year, where our clients are coming to us and saying, we want to digitize, not where we are maybe coming in and be seen to forcing products and solutions almost down their throats at times, but they are really coming up and saying, what can we digitize from our manual processes? Because some of them saw really how much they got hurt, and operations really sometimes came to a halt, given that if you needed to be in the office to get anything done, that wasn't possible within the COVID times, and no one wants to go through that again. So there's much bigger appetite for digitization of a broad, kind of scope of everyone's operations. So that's the first thing. And number two, of course, I think one of the main conversations that are also dominating is really the cloud conversation within government, which has always been a major issue from a regulatory point of view. Because for us well, when you are dealing with a government entity, you're dealing with citizen data or data that is sometimes sensitive to the country. So you don't want to expose yourself to being dependent on another country or jurisdiction if you are a South African entity for your data. So one of the main conversations that I think have progressed quite a lot, and in my space, it absolutely makes the a lot of difference is really having a lot of the major hyperscalers, as we call them, cloud providers, having data center presence within South Africa makes the conversation easier. So now we have shifted from an education around cloud technologies to really coming up with use cases and getting down to the nuts and bolts of how our clients can utilize cloud. Whereas a couple of years ago, it was still awaiting a lot of regulatory clarity in terms of can government institutions, for example, move certain workloads to an international cloud provider, right? Because they didn't have data center presence within the country, which again, from a product point of view, created a very limited suite of offerings for us because with cloud computing, you are allowed to do so much more than you would be able to do within an on-premise environment. So those were the two main discussions I think I was having at this year's Govtech in particular.
What are the main challenges to digitization in the public sector? What is still slowing down progress?
Look, I think the first thing, well, it's a big elephant in the room, but finances, right? Budgets. We again, given that we just went through COVID and we all know the cost of living at the present moment. So the public purse is also very much compromised. So there is a budget constraint that we are operating under. So that's the first thing, and of course, trying to find ways to kind of ask for that budget and plan is proving a challenge. But number two, I think in the public sector space in particular, it's one of the main blockers is really culture. Right. So even once you've gotten a client to see the value, but it's also around who else is doing this in the space. You know, there's a reluctance to be a first mover, unfortunately, in the government space at times. You do find individuals who kind of enjoy playing a first mover role, but that's really a big thing because if you don't have it on a national level, or if it's not a national conversation, it's very hard for an individual client to say, okay, I want to try this out because that they would take all of the risk should it not work, should a particular digitization project not work. So those I'd say are two of the main issues or blockers that I'm finding. However, the second one, it's really an exciting one because it's something that is changing over time. And I find that sometimes it helps when you're speaking to a forum of IT professionals, like let's say at a GovTech, where it's not a one-to-one and one individual taking that risk, but we are able to have a industry conversation. We're able to all ideate collectively and say, this is the new way of doing things potentially, and then everyone can buy in at one time. So the second one, I think it's really a matter of time before it eases up and changes. And of course, we are coming up to elections, for example, and at this point, there will also be another opportunity for new technologies for us to explore how can new technologies assist in the electoral process, and government departments are very willing to hear us out. So I think this particular year will prove very interesting in the IT space leading up to the next national elections. So that's one of my, I would say, main predictions for 2023. I think we will see a lot of um, digitization, especially as it relates to citizen engagement and engagement with voters. I think for the first time in a very long time, we will see, and I think we saw it in the US in 2008 with Barack Obama running, how he used social media, for example, right? I think in the South African context, I really, based on the conversations that I'm seeing, we will see a lot of digitally managed kind of whether it's campaigns or regional initiatives. I think this year will be for South Africa a really breakthrough year in how we engage with citizens.
What is your approach to continuous learning and staying relevant in the workplace? And how can youth remain hopeful of the future?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I've done is you really have to be intentional about your learning. You have to, if you are someone who likes to be organized, you have to book it in, right? So for me, as an example, there's no at no point am I not reading something, right? So my approach is really I like reading books simply because it allows me to drill down in any particular topic. I like to have a broad understanding. And of course, from a day-to-day point of view, the nice thing about being in 2023 is that there's so much material, easy to consume material that gives you almost quick fixes and keeps you energized and learning every day. This is one of them, right? Podcasts is something I consume a lot. Find the right podcast that's more on a daily kind of routine. You know, when you're at work, on your lunch break, you watch a little podcast, you watch a little 5 to 10 minute video. Those things really add up when you look at a 12-month, 24-month span. But again, for me, my approach is have those bite-sized chunks, those continuous kind of pieces of content that you consume, but go levels deeper. You're right, because it's not useful also to, I feel at least, to know too a lot about a little about a lot of things. Try to also know a lot about a few things, right? So which is why I really enjoy reading books, whether it's politics, I'll go on a run. Maybe I'll buy 3 books, political books, and I'll just work through those. And once I finish those, I go on to the next topic. Could be maybe leadership, business leadership. You buy 3 books, you go, you drill down. And as I said, in the meantime, you're still consuming that content on a daily basis to just keep you energized, keep your mind thinking, keep your mind active, because that's very important. So you speak about being hopeful, right? These are the things that keep you hopeful, because if you're just sitting in the current state and you're not learning and you're not feeling energized, it's very easy to go into a state of depression. So you always have to be very offensive around this, be on the offense, and make it a conscious thing to really be excited and always looking forward into the future. But I think to just wrap up, to reiterate the point around knowing a lot about a few things is super key, because that's for me in my career absolutely been my strategy on how to stay relevant. You have to decide, and I would encourage people to really map that against who they are as a person. So don't try to do what the next person is doing, because you're only going to be in a position where you won't be differentiated, right? Your best asset is who you are, how you grew up, how you think, your family dynamics, and all of those things. Incorporate those, and I understand that it's not easy, and sometimes it's very frightening for a lot of people. But I've seen in my career that it has helped me immensely once I got past that, because I then managed to just focus on the things that are of interest to me, things that I'm passionate about. For example, I spoke about mentorship, right? Reason why I'm passionate about mentorship is because I never had access to mentorship, right? And mentors, good mentors. I never had those. So those are things, that's a direct correlation between who I am as a person and also what I chose to focus on and be passionate about and also learn about, because I didn't just talk about it or whatever. I read about it. I really studied it. So that's what I would encourage people to do, and that's our approach that has absolutely worked for me, and it's one that I'll continue to employ.
Phila, how as a young South African are you currently making sense of everything that's going on in the country and in the world? And how do you stay sane?
Phew. Look, my approach is always, learning first. So as I said, stay informed. This is absolutely key. And in today's world, I think it's even more important, because you want to build your own point of reference, right? Um, when you just consume what is out there in the media without a lot of understanding and insight, that also is not helpful, right? So because it's also peppered with a whole lot of agendas. So that's the first thing. Stay informed, know what's happening, but always with the aim of having a inquisitive and questioning mind, right? Why does that happen? Why are they saying this? That doesn't make sense to me. Let me read up more on it, because it's also easy to say, I don't believe that, or that doesn't make sense, but do the work. Why? You need to be able to articulate those things, in my opinion, right? So for me, it makes it easy for me to always be able to make sense of what's going on. And once I then do that, it's always important to map it back to my situation, right? Okay, fine. So here's what's going on, but what does that mean for me? We speak about ESCOM, right? As an example, the power utility. Read up on what are actually the problems. Why is this? How did this problem come to be, right? Why is it not being solved? Right? And everyone can have a different opinion. Who are the stakeholders, right? The politicians, the ESCOM CEO. We saw what just happened now with the ESCOM CEO after surviving essentially a poison attack that was meant to murder him. And what does that mean for us as young South Africans? What does that mean for South Africa? Right? Is this how we operate? What does this mean? Each and every person needs to have that answer for themselves, and then you map it back to you. And again, I work in the public sector, so it really hit directly to me to say, what does this mean for the South African public sector as well? It's a very dangerous time, dangerous precedent to be set. And also, what does that mean for me, right? Do I have political aspirations? Maybe I'm just making an example. And if you do, you need to be very well understanding of the environment that you might be entering yourself into, right? And what would you do differently and bring into that environment? So for me, to simply answer your question, making sense of this requires effort, and it requires learning, and it requires you to sit down and plan and really think about things. And yeah, and then from there, hopefully, if you can match it with certain actions, and that could mean, researching on the power issue to say, if I want to start a business, what are some of the considerations that I need to have? Green energy, alternative forms of energy. So it creates opportunities in and of itself if you do think about it, and be willing to make the actions that need to be taken or can be taken on the back of that exercise. So yeah, for me, I'm just a guy who likes learning. So I always start there to say I will not move until I understand something. So yeah, that's my approach.
In closing, what is your vision for the future of cities? What would you like to see, and how do we get there?
Yeah. From a vision point of view, I mean, for me, I'd really like to see South Africa, take its place as in the first world, right? Or as close as we can to the first world. And what that means is really to digitize a lot of the manual processes and manual ways of doing things. I think that's the first thing. So digital digital cities, a digital approach to cities. And we've started doing it, right, in drips and drabs. So citizen engagement must be digitized as much as possible. This is the first thing. And then the second thing on top of that kind of digital city approach, then I think we can talk of smart cities to say, how can we use the data that is sitting within those systems to enhance our day-to-day lives, right? And this could be in small things like, for example, and we see it with apps like, let's say, Google Maps, where you log in, you check the traffic, you check where the congestions might be, and you get an alternative route, for example, right? So imagine if we can do that at scale on a lot of things within our cities. For example, let's say traffic lights, if they could detect that there's a congestion maybe on this kind of lane or traffic that's moving this way, and it can automatically maybe change the timings, right? To say, oh, okay, because there's too much traffic this side, the traffic light will stay open for maybe 10 seconds more than it usually does, right? Because there's no point green, and then there's only two cars going, and then the rest of us have to wait. So these are small things that can really change the way we experience and learn, live, and work within cities. So for me as an IT guy, really I'm focused on the digital aspects of it, and then hoping to also graduate onto the data side of things. We see it now with Chat GPT. I haven't played around with it too much, but for example, all that is really data and analytics at an incredibly high level that we have never seen before. That's all that is. But at the end of the day, it's the same ideas that we've been playing with for the last couple of years, last decade, on how can we use data to predict and to be smart actually and suggest things back to us. So that's my vision. The problem statement is the culture, number one, right? The culture has to be accepting of that. That's the first thing. You have to want to do these things. You have to see the value in these things. I'll give you an example, right? To say, and for some of these things are for good reason. Like for example, I have even family members, right? My mom's very old school, where she hates internet banking, right? Or cell phone banking, just doesn't trust it, right? She's from the old school. She wants to go to an ATM, take out money, go to a bank, interface with someone, and get things done, right? So that's a culture thing, right? And we won't completely solve it. However, that's a big inhibitor because you can build the systems, but if people don't trust or don't want to engage, then it will never happen. So that's the first thing. And how we can come, I guess, out of that is just by educating and almost showing value, and people will eventually gravitate to some of these technologies. So that's culture. But number two, finances, right? So it doesn't help that we're in the position that we're in as a country. I don't think we're in a healthy financial position, but hopefully that will turn around. So working together, and if we take care of the money as well and reinvest it into the right projects, it will absolutely assist us going forward. So at the moment, the finances are an issue, and linked to the finances in South Africa and actually a lot of countries around the world, corruption, right? Because you might have the money, but does it get to the people? So corruption for us is a big deal, big problem. For Africa, as especially as a whole, we do have a culture problem as it relates to corruption. So we have to attack that heads on, or continue to attack that. And unfortunately, it doesn't help that even our president at the moment is accused. So think about it this way: we've had in South Africa, if I'm excluding Kgalema Motlanthe, we've had 4 presidents, right? Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, Cyril Ramaphosa, right? 2 of those, the immediate 2, have faced, quite a lot of scrutiny from a corruption perspective. This doesn't help, right? So maybe that leads me to the last problem, last element that's an inhibitor: leadership, lack of leadership from the private sector business side, as well as the politics, right? The political parties. And for this to work, you need both sides working together, because the government is the custodian of the people and the country, and the private sector plays a key role in any economy, right? So you need those two working together. So we do have a leadership vacuum. Now, how do we fix that? Lastly, I'm going to start from the back, working forward. I can only speak from where I'm seeing things, from my generation, the youngsters coming up. We do have a responsibility to get better, and it doesn't happen automatically. I always find this funny when it's like, the youngsters will fix everything. They can, but it doesn't mean they will, because it's not automatic, right? So we need to do a lot of work, keep reading, keep learning, keep understanding where the problems are. Why is this happening in South Africa? And we need to be committed to then being the changes. And it starts in our own circles of influence. And then, amen. I don't know where it goes from there, but I would like to think, if you build a good enough base of individuals who are good, want to do good, in time, the country will reap its benefits. So that's the leadership thing. That's how you solve that. You solve that through education. You solve that over time through young people building an agenda of their own and executing, most importantly. So for us not to make the same mistakes that our forefathers or those that came before us made. And then also that leads into corruption, because that's the values thing. We have to build the right values, stop rewarding behaviors like that, right? Stop celebrating individuals who are corrupt, individuals who are stealing from our people. For as long as we continue to do that, we'll not fix this. It's really as simple as that and as brutal as that, and it has to be. So we as the young people, or whoever actually cares to change, needs to be part of that process. And in South Africa, in too many sectors, corruption is the norm, and we need to stand up against that. And sometimes that means, as an individual, taking a sacrifice and pain within yourself. But we need to justify that through our values. If your values dictate that, then you would be willing to do that. So that's the corruption side. And then I think if we do that, if we continue to work hard, have the right people in right places in the private sector, government sector, together with the right values, it will fix the finances going forward. Because South Africa, there's no reason why South Africa should be in the position that it is in financially. We have good universities. Maybe the high school and primary school system needs a lot of work, but I think with some money thrown at it and the right people, we could change that around. But we have good universities, we have a good judicial system, good finance system. So there's a lot going for us. We just need to execute really well over time. And I think then the financial health of the country will come back to life. We've seen it throughout the world happen. So we have to keep faith there. So yeah, I think that's for me really my view on the world. But yeah, I'm excited and I think we can do it.
A big thank you to Phila Lubisi for this insightful conversation on the Bright Young Minds show on Future Cities Africa. Youth is the future of African cities.